All right. Hi there, everyone. How's it going? Well, in the first place, it's awesome to be here. The venue is amazing. It's better and better. I think we're not done with the setup. Yeah, that works. Wicked. All right. Hi there, everyone. I'm Tank. No? No, I'm... Okay. Oh. Looked like it was there, no? Yeah, I need to. Play mirroring, arrangement. But you know what? I'm just gonna move. Why is it there? There's something particularly wrong going on. Sorry, guys. Okay. Right. Cool. No internet. Shit. Dead. So whatever, I'm gonna play from the speaker notes side of things, and we're just gonna go with it, okay?
What is the reason behind the internet? I can give you...
I don't know if the window was closed. No, it's fine. Okay. Cool. Is it running? Can I? All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Tank. Sorry for the inconvenience. I'm pretty bad at configuring the monitor, apparently. And I've been here last year to talk about HTML5 game development. And just a few days before that, I signed with a new company called Kano, which I'm going to talk to you about later. So since then, my pretty much daily mission has been working on a product that could teach as fast as possible to kids about technology, hardware, and software. So I'm going to talk a bit about that. Teaching technology has been a hot topic recently since basically programming has been introduced in the British school curriculum at a very young age, and it's been very discussed. So I'm going to talk about the current scenario a little bit and then my experience and make some bridges. And I'm going to do all of this from the speaker view with my notes because, because otherwise, yeah, I think the other window was shut. So, Generation Z, talking about the current scenario, that is the term we use to describe roughly the demographic of people born after 1995 and still ongoing. We have very little idea because a lot of these generations still haven't hit the adult or the professional life. We don't know how they're going to approach technology in their adult or professional life. Little that we know is the word we sort of presenting around them as the development community and the word of tech and apps and environment of products that we're shaping around them. So we live in an age of channels. There's no doubt it's pretty easy right now, and we're going towards making it even easier to stream every piece of content to your We're making it pretty easy to stream every type of piece of content to your desktop, laptop, smartphone, tablet, wristwatch, or glasses. although I don't think we live in an age of content first anymore. So what was cool about the web when it boomed, and we were coming from an age in which radio and television were probably the two main channels, so there was a very, very small percentage of the population deciding what the rest of the world would be consuming. And with web, people, when it was simple enough, people would just start creating and shaping the world of information they see around. While now that technology is getting more and more complex again, we're kind of getting back to the surface. Again, we have a lot of layers up on web technologies and a variety of tools, and people are getting, I think, a bit further and back to the consumer side. So I think even though the mobile era is great and is bringing a lot of innovation, what touchscreens have been doing so far is give us new way to touch, slide, swipe, and scratch the surface. While when I approached technology for the first time, what I really found cool was going deeper and how simple it was to find that side of the stack attractive. And it was really simple. So I say this is important. Making and being on the other side of things is important because we are frustration-driven creatures. I think what drives progress in technology and is the fact that we're unsatisfied of what's around, and we're always going to try to create something that best suits our needs and requirements. And that is what makes us rewarded about work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how my passion for technology started, and I think it's a story maybe a few people can relate here, maybe pretty much anyone had a similar story to a degree. But for most people, technology started like this. At least to a lot of people, even in the room that I talked to, it started with a Commodore 64 being dumped in the room when there were children or whatever. And after the painful experience of getting games running and finishing those really simple games, the experience was pretty much it. So they started programming. The technology was sort of simpler, a bit tougher to go through maybe, but you couldn't do much else, so they started creating. For me, it started a little bit different because I come from a different background. Not this slide, this slide. So when I was about 7, my dad, which is a musician, but he had a brief career in IT, he had a lot of spare parts, so he dumped a computer made with spare parts in my room. And I started tinkering with it. There was no games on it. It was like Windows 95 because I'm pretty young. And after I was done playing Minesweeper, the only sort of icon that attracted me on the launch bar was this red icon with a black and white eye on it, which was Photoshop 4. I was really attracted by the launch screen and because of all the psychedelic stuff going on it. And I loaded a sample images, and I ended up playing with the channels panel. And for the first time, I realized that I had an actual impact on things when I disabled some RGB channels, and actually I was doing nothing. But I seen the screen change, and for once, I wasn't on the user side. I was making something. Not really, but I thought so. So I kept tinkering with Photoshop for months until eventually I could create some of those cheesy images with gradients and simple selection paths and brushes. And a few months after that, my dad again dumped me in front of the computer. This time it was open, and he wanted me to replace some spare parts, and I was scared as hell because I didn't want to break anything, etc., etc. And my dad pretty much told me to break things, explain me what the pieces were, and it was actually really simple because at the time, computers weren't very small sealed black boxes like this one, and it was pretty simple to look at it and go, okay, change this piece. So after breaking the computers a few times, I eventually learned how to put together my computers, and that was probably the most empowering and magical sensation I've ever. So why does people... a lot of people get scared of approaching technology from that kind of point of view, even though, again, we're not talking about people in this room, but the general people, the general demographic. So one of the reasons is we kind of tend to market it like this. So this is what the word consists programming to be. It's a white skinny dude closed in a dark room with delivery pizza and a lot of empty cups of coffee, crisps all over the table, working on a matrix-style terminal, building something that no one else understands. Well, really, when I was 8, this was it for me. I was a wizard and I had magic powers. And I think the best definition that I've been given of programming was, of what someone got passionate about programming for, was my friend Giovanni Lodi, which is a very good engineer, but also gives simple explanations, which is pretty key. And he told me he was reading this book, Aragon, which was a fantasy book with dragons and such and magic. And in a passage, it's explaining what magic is. And magic is nothing more about, for Aragon than the knowledge of a set of words and a language which, used through the years, gave so much meaning that these words can influence the world around them. So programming is nothing more than magic. It's the exact textbook definition of Aragon of magic. It's words that do stuff without the need of material. So programming for me, programming, again, something similar started like this. I was going for a holidays, 3 days, with my grandmother in the mountains. I was going to get bored as hell, so I got this book from my dad's shelf. It was very attractive for me because I was a very weird 8, 9 years old, whatever. And I was really attracted by these forms and cheesy stuff going on, especially those background patterns tidying up in gray and white. I thought they were awesome, but hey, it was the 90s, so they probably were really elegant. And I spent 3 days in the mountains consuming this book. I got back, built my first web page in 3 hours, got my dad up there, and I was like, yeah, this is going to work. I'm going to open the page, and it's just going to load. And nothing worked. So my father taught me about pretty much the concept of iterating till it works, bang your head against the screen. And that's something that in most disciplines you don't really learn. You usually learn a lot of theory, and then the thing pretty much works. In technology, there's just an exact moment in which it blinks, and again, boom, I was feeling empowered like never. So how are we teaching programming right now? My main point by telling this story is not about HTML 3.2, of course, but it's about the fact that learning happens. You dump a child in a room with any sort of tool. It can be a drum kit, it can be a set of paintings or a guitar, and eventually it's going to become an artist of some sort, because that's what a child is supposed to do. It's supposed to go against things fearlessly, loving breaking them and loving the sort of progress, and just enjoy its time, while we are more used to failure and we are scared of wasting our time. So how are we learning programming right now? Well, that's the white skinny dude stereotype again. Well, there's a few problems in it. Often we are teaching tech for the sake of tech. So the language comes first. I'm gonna teach or learn Java because it's gonna give me career prospects, but maybe before. Or I'm going to just learn something because I want to learn something specific, while tech is really relevant. It's boring. It's just a tool. It's those magic powers that allow us to do great things. And we should focus really on the great things, or at least that's my opinion. Then tech is fast changing. You haven't got the time to write a book about a technical skill or something. It becomes irrelevant in the markets. And this is going to happen to pretty much any type of tech. Tech is not Microsoft Office. It sounds a bit like an overstatement. It sounds weird. But the point is, even though here we all know what IT is, a lot of kids, when they're 60 years old, in a lot of education systems, like in Italy or in England, they're dumped in a room in what they call IT lab, and they're taught how to compile Excel spreadsheets and make nice presentations with PowerPoint. There's no wonder kids hate that technology, because if they think that's it. Then we are raised to be afraid. Again, we are pushed to not break things, not play with things we don't know, while really that's the only way to learn. By many other fields in my work, even if you don't break things. So tech changes fast, but what entertains us doesn't. So games like Pong or Space Invaders or Snake or even the most recent Minecraft have such simple game mechanics that they could entertain it years ago, and they will still be there to entertain us in 50 years. And they're great ways to show what you can achieve with few lines of code or very simple programs. So that's a good way to teach kids programming, because other than the fact that they've never seen Snake, they seem to enjoy it anyway. Then for kids that don't like games, that there's other things to teach them or to motivate them. There's things like generative art, and you can use processing or processing.js to do pretty much any sort of visual graphic illustration, or there's ways to play music with code, for example, Sonic Pi, etc. So what works? There's three very simple principles to me that can motivate not only kids, but any beginner to learn coding. And I think we should all apply them to sort of get people in it. Instant reward is the first. So no one is going to go through all the syntax, the syntactic pain and low-level implementation details if you don't show them the sort of cool stuff that you can do with code. So get them starting on something pre-existing again, like editing a pre-existing game, and show them the power of just moving a couple lines of code about. Experience and design. We often undervalue it, especially in the open source community. But often we are creating learning tools and we are checking them on GitHub, and really the only people that will use them are other developers. So experience and design is always overrated, I think, underrated in the development community. But if I didn't find attractive the Photoshop 4 icon, which wasn't even that great, or that book because I was a weird child, I would have never found out about two of my passions, development and design, and never got that job that I love going to any day. Then tools and choice. Offer an environment of choice because, again, games might be not everyone's cup of tea, or music or design, but at least anyone will find attractive to them. So at Kano, we try to merge these three ingredients in the product we've been creating. So last year, I joined the company, and the prototype that I've been shown by the co-founders was looking like this, literally. It was basically a shoebox containing the cheapest, simplest possible computer out there, which is the Raspberry Pi. I think anyone in here knows what the Raspberry Pi is, more or less. If you don't, it's basically a Linux board, an integrated computer of the size of a credit card, and it costs about $35. And the problem is, in order to get started using this as a learning tool, there's a lot of pieces missing that, again, the mainstream public have difficulties putting together, like the right, yeah, okay, like the right cables and the right devices, the keyboard, etc. So we bundled it with a book explaining with very simple words and illustrations how to use it and put it together. And then we created an environment of apps on Raspbian and modified pre-existing ones to allow kids to hack on Pong or Minecraft using visual programming. And everything is coming out the box as simple as possible. And 8 years old get it without pretty much the need of any help. And after 1.5 years of work, the product looked like this. So we produced and manufactured our own hardware and our keyboard and color-coded cables to explain the responsibility of each component in a simple way. We redesigned the books and created a lot of apps that are on the OS, and customized the Raspbian enough to call it our own OS, optimize performance and the kernel to boot in pretty much 50% the time of Raspbian, have our own Windows manager, and we pretty much made it the simplest possible experience. So again, open source is great, and we have been using these open source tools as our main ingredient and bundling them in a story. But I'm running out of time, so I might just skip this slide. Then we're using visual programming. Again, we're using this library from Google that is open source called Blockly.js, which is pretty much JavaScript, an implementation in the browser of Scratch, and we plugged it into an hybrid app with Minecraft and Pong so they can make buildings with it. Then Snake, this is pretty much LXJS contribution to it, because last year when I gave my talk, after the talk, I sat back in the audience, and with my very short attention span, I started hacking this terminal version of Snake. I finished it when I was on my flight back to London, then open sourced it, my colleagues liked it, we made it configurable to teach command line. So that's your contribution as well. Storytelling, because again, calling a command a spell, or calling the CPU the brain of the computer, using simple language really makes it easier to understand complex concepts. Me too, when I'm talking to an academic CS person, or I find very tough to understand things that end up being really simple just because of the terminology, etc. And my point is, spread your passion. So we're all here because we had an experience like the one I was describing before. Maybe your dad got you started with something, explaining you about technology, or you've seen something, some app that inspired you, you played some game and you wanted to hack in it. Everyone here had the privilege of approaching technology because of a lucky experience. And I think we're not doing enough of a good job, or we could certainly improve at spreading it to people that didn't, and sort of changing the stereotype of programming. Everyone could use making a little bit more, if not to become programmers, certainly because being behind how things work is pretty much our nature and what makes us feel accomplished. So again, it's not about creating a generation of Python programmers or engineers. It's about taking that spark that I described to you when I was talking about my experience with my dad, and the spark for creation and making and designing and being behind things, and spreading it to as many people as we can, so we can create a community of developers or tech people that will be a more interesting demographic, instead of creating an elite of very low-level specific knowledge. So let's try to create the spark and reproduce it in our daily life. I explained you how we're doing with Kano, and that's pretty much it from me. Tight deadline. And after that, well, you know, you can pre-order from now, and you'll keep ordering.
Okay.
Cheers.
So I recently learned that Intel has a research center in China, which is an open source technology research center. This is where our next speaker comes from. He comes from China. He's creator and maintainer of the Node WebKit project. And please help me welcoming Roger Wang. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be here to introduce the Node WebKit project to you. And my name is Roger Wang, as introduced, and I'm from Intel, and I just came here from China. So what's Node WebKit project? It's a runtime for the web developers to develop native desktop applications. And it does so by combining the Chromium browser and the node.js project. So from the browser's perspective, you can use all the node.js platform libraries directly from DOM. That means you can call all the node.js functions directly, and the JavaScript objects can refer to each other directly in the same thread. And from the node.js perspective, it provides a nice GUI solutions for the JavaScript developers, and it uses all the technologies you are already familiar with, including HTML5, WebGL, and so on. Why Node.js is chosen for extending the browser's capabilities? Because it's a popular JavaScript platform, and it has a very large number of libraries, and developers can make use of. And it's actually very fast and lightweight, so it can be used even on a mobile platform on the client side. And another important reason is that it uses the same JavaScript engine as the engine in Chromium, so the two projects can be combined directly very easily. And it also provides a packaging mechanism, so you can transform your existing code for your web apps directly to desktop apps. As shown in this picture, suppose you already have your HTML, JavaScript, and CSS files, and all the resources like images, and you just need to write a manifest file named package.json, and then zip it and ship it together with the Node WebKit runtime. It looks like a standalone native executable file to the end user. So to them, they might be thinking they are just running native desktop applications, and during all the process, you don't even to know any C or C++ stuff. So even you are pure web developers, and you can develop desktop apps now. Next, I will introduce a little bit on the manifest file. That's the only file you will need to add it to your web apps. The picture is an example. The only mandatory fields are the name fields and the main fields. The main fields specify the starting page of your applications. And the name field acts as some kind of ID field. And you can also put the initial properties of the application window, such as its dimensions and whether it is a full screen and whether it is resizable and so on. And you can also specify some JavaScript flags to enable or disable the features of the V8 JavaScript engine. And and as you can see, the name of the manifest file is the same as the many node.js modules. So you can actually mix it together with your existing node.js applications. You can just add the fields for Node WebKit into your existing package.json file. And then you will need to package it and distribute it for the desktop platforms. Currently, it supports all the three major desktop platforms. And the packaging process is kind of straightforward. This slide lists one of the packaging ways. As you can see, you can just appending the zip file of your applications right at the end of the Node WebKit executable, and then you redistribute it to the end users, so it looks like a native app to them. There are also grant tools from the community that can automate this process for you. So you can just run grant it, and then it will package it for you for all the three platforms. As Chromium, it also comes with a debug tool. It's actually the Chromium debug tool inside the Chromium. So you can debug the DOM code as well as the code from Node.js there. And so, because it combines Node.js directly into the DOM, so you can use all the modules from Node.js directly. And here is an example. You can read the files from DOM, and you can get the CPU information. One thing you need to remember is that Node WebKit comes with a copy of Node.js inside it. So all the built-in modules are available in your applications, and it also supports third-party Node.js modules as long as you ship it with your application. And Node WebKit also comes with native GUI libraries, so you can create native GUI elements with it. Here is an example of a menu. The code is on the left side. There is a special built-in module named nw.gui that provides all the native GUI elements. As you can see, you can create a native menu and add JavaScript code into the callbacks of it. And it also supports system tree and shell functions, so that you can launch URL with the external default browser, And you can also open some items in the default file explorer or show it in the folder. And it also supports all the native modules from Node.js platforms. But keep in mind that you must link the native module with Node WebKit, not Node.js. So we provide a tool called NWGYP to replace Node GYP for it. It will link against Node WebKit for you. In the workshop this afternoon, I will show how to use it. And it also comes with an experimental feature called snapshot. It is used to protect your JavaScript code. So it works in this way. You compile your JavaScript code into machine code with a tool called NW snapshot. And then in the manifest file, you just need to load it into the applications. And then you can call all the functions in that JavaScript file. In the distribution of your applications, there is no source code of full.js in this example. And of course, you can control the window of the applications in many ways, and you can hide it, show it, maximize it, minimize it, or moving it. The internal of Node WebKit looks like this. As you know, there is a V8 JavaScript engine from Node.js, and in Chromium, there are also a WebKit engine with V8. Of course, it's called Blink now. That has something to do to the confusion of the name of the project, because when it was started, the inside part of the Chromium is still named WebKit, it's not Blink. But today, Node WebKit is still based on the Chromium engine. So technically, it should be called Node Blink, but the name is not changed. So the two parts share a single instance of the V8 JavaScript engine. So the JavaScript objects between them can refer to each other directly, and the function calls can be made directly in the same thread, and there is no IPC involved. Another important part is that it shares a different security model with the web applications. I listed the different model from desktop applications and web applications in browser. In browser, your apps is downloaded and run on the user side on the fly from the internet. So it's not trusted by user by default. When it tries to access to native devices like your location and camera, at runtime, it needs to ask for users' permissions by some dialogues. But for a native desktop application like your Skype, you trust it when you install it in your computer, and then it can do everything it wants in your computer. So as you can see, the security model is very different. Since Node WebKit supports you to develop a native desktop application, so it follows the native applications module. So that means your code can do everything it can on the computer. As you can see, it can access to files and any hardware as it wants. But as you know, the web engine provides some security features that works for the web applications, such as that you cannot do cross-origin access. That is changed in the Node WebKit project. So the security model is like this. There are two kinds of frames in Node WebKit, and one is the normal frames, just as in browser, and the other is called the node frames. The node frames can do universal access to all the other frames. So it can do cross-domain access, and it has access to all the node.js capabilities. And it can also goes around other security checks in the web engine, like setting the values of the file input element directory. While in browser, the value can only be set by the end user by opening a file dialogs. There are also custom features like NW fake top. It lets you to embed any website into an iframe. As you know, many websites will check that whether it runs in the iframe. So in Node WebKit, there are supports that make it think that is running in a top frame. And it also have other native support like frameless window and clipboard, and other features like WebGL and WebRTC, and it also comes with the WebDriver support, so you can use the automatic testing tools to test your applications. That's all for my talk today. So in the workshop this afternoon and tomorrow's afternoon, I'll show you some examples to let you know how to use these features. Thanks.
For Tom Ashworth. Woo.
Hello, can you hear me? Whoa, it's echoey in here. Cool. So, looking good. Right. Firstly, hello. I'd just like to say this venue is absolutely incredible. I've been in the city for a couple of days, and I'd really recommend, if you have some time, going and seeing some of the sights of the city, like the castle, some of the churches, and the kind of high ground off this way. It's absolutely an amazing city. I've also been walking solidly for a couple of days, which means I'm absolutely knackered. So if I break down in tears halfway through, you know why. So this is me. I'm a front-end developer at Twitter. I work on TweetDeck. I have to have this slide just in case I forget my name, which happens sometimes. I spend some of my time playing this thing. This is a sousaphone. I'm in a band called the Neon Saints. You can look us up on Twitter and Facebook. And I don't normally play both of them, the trumpet as well. But when I work, most of the time, it looks like this, bottle of wine frequently in hand. And this is the product I work on, TweetDeck. I know a couple of people already who use this. Maybe you use it. It's actually quite likely that some of the accounts you follow, so the news accounts or some verified accounts that you follow, use TweetDeck. I think it's really great. It's kind of a power tool for Twitter. So firstly, a kind of disclaimer about this talk. We're kind of talking about the event horizon of web technology. This stuff is coming. It's not ready. It's not in the stable versions of browsers yet, but it is coming. So really my goal is to get you excited and get you interested. Some of this stuff is liable to change. But kind of with that in mind, I think it's really interesting to just look at this stuff and see what's coming down the pipe. So let's get started. This is a page that ruins people's days everywhere. We're used to seeing this page. If you're tethering, if you're in a coffee shop, or if you're in a kind of multitude of other places. I've had it quite a lot over the last couple of days without data roaming, so I go and sit somewhere and there's no Wi-Fi. But this page kind of reminds us, as people who build stuff for the web, that we have to face some hard truths. Truths like the fact that connectivity is simply just not ubiquitous. There's plenty of places I can think of, trains, in cars, when just walking around, or if you're in some kind of tunnel, particularly in a train. All those places you have no connectivity. We're kind of supposed to share experiences with each other, and that's what the kind of social platforms are for, and indeed, to a large extent, what the web's for. But the thing that we often forget is that all these services assume good connectivity. And have you ever noticed that the places where we have these experiences, like on a mountain or out in the countryside somewhere, are places where you have no connectivity? If the service is not set up to work in these places, then you simply can't use them as they were intended. And there are other things like developing countries where connectivity just isn't as good as it is in kind of Western nations. But I'm particularly thinking of Brazil and the World Cup. There were quite serious kind of connectivity issues and infrastructure issues in Brazil. The web in those places should be a viable platform. There is no reason we shouldn't be able to say to clients and bosses, the web is viable in these places, and we can build apps that will run in these places. But right now, we really can't say that with a straight face. So let's look at where we are now with the kind of options for offline. There are some technologies that are used to solve these problems. They tend to be just a kind of mishmash of what's available, put together in a kind of hacky way that works most of the time, but is missing some key functionality. That means there are surmountable problems. Technologies like local storage, IndexedDB, the hidden iframe technique, and techniques like having a client-side data model, syncing that later on, and batching up network requests. People are doing these things, but it's really not ideal. And asset delivery, which is a key component of this whole thing, which is something native has over the web, getting data and keeping it on the device, or getting data to the device and keeping it there. It's simply not up to scratch on the web. App Cache solves some of these problems, but it really is not the ideal solution. And it kind of makes developers feel like this kid. And as I said, this is maybe how I'll end up at the end of this talk. Some people are doing it well. Lanyard are a particularly good example, and the developers working on this spawned the App Cache douchebag article, which is widely cited for kind of kicking off this whole discussion about what the web could be in offline scenarios. But this stuff is hard, and there are some people who aren't doing it particularly well. I hope nobody here works on this, and I'm sorry if I'm not really picking on them. It's just an example that kind of frustrated me in particular. This is DevDocs. This is a site I really, really like the idea of. It promises to give you offline access to the documentation of a whole range of projects. It uses App Cache, so it sounds pretty promising, and the About page tells you that things will be available offline. And indeed, if you look in local storage, you can see there's a whole load of data there. You can see the libraries I have cached, and there's some data, so hopefully this thing is going to work offline. But as soon as you try to use the site when you're, say, in a train or you have no connectivity, this happens. which is a complete disaster and makes me feel like this. The reason is that they are caching the headers or the kind of titles and some metadata about the page, but not the actual content. So that means you can search for the documentation that you theoretically have cached, try to open it, and then it fails. So this is the message you see when you do that. Now, the other thing to notice about this page, and hopefully you can read it, is that it kind of tries to guess at what the problem might be. You know, that you could be offline, might be missing from the server, possibly a proxy, maybe there's a firewall. Really, there's no definite way to know what the actual problem is from the point of view of the developers of the site. Now, that hints at a problem that we need to kind of, or a mindset shift that we need that needs to happen. Are we offline isn't the right question. Online is the real problem here. It's extremely hard, possibly impossible, to define online. Anywhere where you're in some kind of captive Wi-Fi kind of portal thing, like a coffee shop, like in a hotel. I've had this problem in my hotel, in an airport, or indeed in some trains. The requests appear to work. You may get a response. And it may even be a success response, but it won't be the response you're looking for. So techniques like pinging a server to see if you're getting something back completely fail. And there's the other problem of when you have some connectivity. So if you're out walking around town somewhere and you have one bar of signal, there's kind of a connection. Do you really have a connection? It's incredibly hard to tell. So we should work with that assumption and move our mindset to the offline first perspective. Now, this hashtag was kind of it was doing rounds on Twitter kind of recently. I think it's a really interesting idea and a really useful place to come at a problem from. The keystone of this idea is that the network is a potentially unavailable resource. So in the same way as we progressively enhance features like local storage, like geolocation, we can progressively enhance the network. After you've delivered your assets to the device, you then assume that there is no network connectivity, and then deliver your experience in such a way that when connectivity returns, you can deal with that and kind of give the user the best experience possible. And this means we have to start thinking about some things that we're currently not very good at on the web. Things like synchronization, giving the user feedback that an action is going to take place later on. What does it mean to send a tweet that isn't going to send just yet, but is going to send later on? What does it mean to check into Foursquare, but only when you actually have some connectivity? Clearly, there are problems with both of those. As I mentioned, Lanyard, also the Financial Times, and projects like Hoodie have been talking about this stuff for a long time. I found an article from 2012 that written by the FT that describes a lot of this stuff and is really impressive, but really the technology is lacking. And asset delivery is, of course, still tricky. The one other idea that we have to shift into our minds is this idea of there being a space constraint on the device. You simply can't have all available content on a device. This is kind of obviously true when you think about it, but sometimes websites will try and dump all the content they have available right now over to you. And this simply isn't going to work. We need to start thinking of the things we build as a kind of shell and some content. DevDocs is a good example of this. There's a kind of UI shell and then some content, but also tweets in TweetDeck, articles on The Guardian, all this kind of thing. There's some content that's a subset of all the available content that you want on your device, and there's some shell that contains the code needed to deliver that content. But right now, there isn't really a great way of doing this. As I said, App Cache offers some options, but we're still quite limited. So this is where this new technology, Service Worker, comes in. Adi mentioned it, but I'm going to take a kind of deep dive into it. Obviously, the name is pretty scintillating, but you kind of know it's good because it's got a boring name. Like lots of things have pretty boring names, like cardboard, toast, sleep. So like you know it's good. This is the kind of quickest summary I could come up with. It's a kind of web worker. So it's background JavaScript, basically, not associated with a document. It responds to some new events that we haven't seen before, and it can create and manipulate these new objects, requests, and responses. It also has programmatic access to cache storage, and the cache storage maps requests to responses. So you can use requests made from the page or created manually to match previously made requests to get things out of the cache. And yes, it's HTTPS only. That's kind of the most condensed summary I could write and still achieve aesthetically pleasing slides. Remember, the first and goldenest rule of Keynote is content last. Now, I'm going to kind of incite your intelligence now. This is a conceptual overview of browsers. You probably kind of know this stuff. But I'm going to show you how Service Worker fits into this. App Cache fits in like this. The browser knows about App Cache and can talk to App Cache, but as developers, we have no direct access to App Cache. This is obviously problematic. So the Service Worker sits between the page and the browser and its network stack, and obviously, therefore, the network. And it can intercept requests made from the page. And that includes cross-origin requests. So if your page makes a request to another API, say GitHub's API or Flickr, or even just downloads images from another site, your Service Worker will see that request and can cache it and do all the things it can with other kinds of requests. As I said, it has programmatic access to your caches, and importantly, it will do nothing unless you ask, unlike App Cache, whose defaults are aggressive, to say the least. And like an extension background page, it's one-to-many, so you can have many pages open, and they'll all be talking to one Service Worker. So let's have a look at some code used, the kind of thing we're going to start seeing in our code to use Service Workers. So first of all, you have to register your Service Worker. Now, I'm obviously omitting some things here, like feature detection. Navigator in Service Worker is an easy way to do it. This registers, or this tells the page that there's a Service Worker available at this URL. The page will then go off and look for that worker, and then go through a series of lifecycle events, install, activate, and eventually your worker will start receiving requests from the page that it's controlling. You can also limit the scope of a Service Worker's, or the request a Service Worker is going to see. This would be really useful if you're working across a number of teams who control different parts of a domain or different paths. It means you can all have different workers and specify which part of the site you can control, and there doesn't need to be any violence in the office. This also has a promise API, so this specification depends quite heavily on promises. So you can give the user feedback if the Service Worker fails to install. Again, another thing you cannot do with App Cache. So this is creating and populating a cache. As I said, caches map requests to responses. So when we add some things to the cache, those URLs are converted into requests. They are fetched, and only when all the URLs I've listed here have all the promises there have fulfilled successfully, will that add promise, fulfill successfully. So that means we can respond to a cache being filled, and if it fails, we can respond to that, tell the user, or do the right thing. Really important that this is very, very explicit. We know what's going on at every stage. And because it's just JavaScript, we can debug this. And then you can persist a cache. So by default, a cache is not persisted. It will be filled, but it won't persist across worker restarts. So there's a global caches kind of map that we can persist a cache in, and then if our worker is killed, for example, if it has some kind of error, or if the browser just decides it's not interested in running your worker anymore, the worker will be killed. But when it comes back up again, this cache I've just created, app v1, will be available. I'm sorry, I'm a bit ill, so if I'm sounding a bit croaky, that's why. And you would do this kind of thing in the install step of a worker's lifecycle. So we can intercept requests from the page, and I'm using some ES6 fat arrow syntax here. So if it looks a bit crazy, or if there are syntax errors, it's because because of that. But you can see we're adding an event listener. There's this new event called fetch. And what we're doing here is responding to that event. So there's a new method on this fetch event called respond with. That takes a promise or a response. And we're matching the request in our cache. So it's looking at all the caches we have available and matching the request that we got from the page in those caches. If that fails, it will fall back to the default, which is to go to the network. So the first thing, this is kind of offline first. The first thing we're doing is going to the cache, then we're going to the network. And if the network fails, we have the option to generate our own response. So we can either do new response or pull something out of a cache somewhere else. You can also match on request type, so you can differentiate between an image request, a navigation, a script tag, so you can kind of do the right thing in every case. Here's a really cool thing that I'm sort of imagining that might be possible. Here, I'm racing 2 caches against the network. This would be really, I think this is interesting because we can do things like, say, I've got a content cache, which is things that I know the user wants. So you could, for example, have a button on the page that the user clicks, and that makes the content associated with that button available offline. It puts it in the cache. Or we have a kind of a cache, a sort of smaller cache with some eviction policy, where we say we're going to cache the last 10 things you looked at. So that might be the last 10 YouTube videos you looked at, or I don't know, the last some emails that you just read. And that's kind of a moving window. And so it may or may not contain the thing that's just being requested. And then we also, at the same time, kick off requests to the network. That means if it's in the content cache, we'll get that straight away. If it's in the kind of recently used cache, we'll get that straight away. And if all that fails, we will go to the network. And of course, we can catch all failures all failures there and do the right thing again. This is untested, so don't necessarily try and run this. But this is the kind of thing that we can do that we need to start exploring. So where are we with service workers? Well, it's not really in browsers yet. The spec is at first draft. It's on GitHub, and it has landed in Chrome Canary. Google, Mozilla, and Samsung are working on it, along with others from the open source community. And it's on GitHub, and that's the URL. Hopefully, you can see that URL. The really nice thing about it being on GitHub is it's not behind a quite unfriendly mailing list. I said it's not in browsers. Google are hoping to have it in Chrome this year. Mozilla have committed to implementing it in Gecko. WebKit, people have expressed an interest in it, but unfortunately, as far as I know, Microsoft and Apple have been silent on it. Obviously, the important one there may be the fruit seller, but it will be interesting to see if it landing in the Android browsers will be kind of a forcing function on Apple to implement it. So if you want to play with this now, and you can right now, open up Canary, update it, and make sure you have this flag turned on. Thank you very much to Addy. I'm not quite sure where he is, but for pointing out today that this was in Canary. And you can try this stuff out right now. Jake Archibald has put together a demo. I also have one, but it's not as good as Jake, so I'd go play with that if I were you. My involvement in this stuff is I built a JavaScript-only implementation. It was kind of slightly crazy hackery. There was a Chrome extension involved, Node as a proxy server. We used some VM API stuff. You can see it there. It's kind of out of date now and also a bit pointless because it's in Canary. The future of this stuff, I'm kind of sort of speculating, but some specifications are in the works that depend on the service worker specification. Background sync API, the push API, task scheduler will all depend on service workers and will integrate tightly with it. And this really is pure speculation. I can see a future where our frameworks are auto-generating our service workers. Angular, say, has resources, meaning it understands roughly the HTTP architecture and the requests that your application is going to make. That might mean it can look at your application and auto-generate you a service worker. There's a possibility for a responsive image solution here. There's going to be a lot of great things we can do with installable websites and background tasks like keeping music running in the background, tracking where you are, and kind of mundane but extremely useful things like alarms. So I guess it's kind of your turn. Get involved in the spec. Understand the UX implications. Try things out. What does it mean for your particular use case to work offline? And push this spec to the limits, because we need to get this right now, because we got it so wrong with app cache. So thank you very much. You can either tweet me, my handle's on there, or use that hashtag, or just kind of come find me afterwards. Thank you very much.
Hey again. So our next talk is called The Art of Connection. In 2013, Angie was voted as one of the 5 rising stars of the 25 women in IT in UK. And she's the head of communication for Mint Digital, a founder of Ladies Who Code, organizer of Devs Love Bacon and Music Tech Meetup, and participates in several other organizations. So somewhere between this, you found the time to come to Lisbon and speak at LXJS. So welcome, Angie McGuire.
Hear me? Yes, you can. Hi. I'm just going to start off, if it's okay, by asking you to do a quick self-audit. So if you have a look at yourselves and how you're sitting, do you have your arms crossed? Are you sitting forward? Are you making eye contact with me? You are. Brilliant. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later on, but your body posture is really, really important when it comes to connecting and communicating, so I'll come back to that in a little bit. Next thing I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm sorry for it, but it's technically for my benefit, I want everyone to stand up for a second. Okay, awesome. And we're going to do, a lot of you will be familiar with power poses, so we're going to do a power pose because it's going to make me feel better, but hopefully if you went out for too long last night, you're feeling a bit hungover, this is going to make you feel awesome. So I want you to stick your hands up in the air. Yeah, nice, okay. Raise your chins. Okay, and take about 5 deep, deep breaths. So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. And one last time, breathe in and out. Okay, take a seat, guys. Thank you. So what you've done, apart from create an amazing photo opportunity, is you have hacked your brain chemically. You have taken your testosterone levels and you've raised them. Technically, to do it properly, you have to do it for between 2 and 5 minutes. But what it does is it raises your testosterone levels and lowers your cortisol levels, which is the stress-inducing hormone. So I'm feeling a little bit less nervous now. Thanks so much. That was up to you guys, so cheers. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about me and about what I've been doing for the last while and why connecting and communication is so important to me. Okay, cool. Oh, sorry. Oh. I love it when this happens. A little failure goes a long way. Sorry to things. Yeah. Should we do the standing up thing again? I could do more stuff with you, but I'm not that cruel. It's terrible. Okay, so looking at your body language really quickly, I can go back to that right now. A lot of you are either distracted because you're working, bad, naughty behavior. Some of you are worried. You're displaying really clear signals of distraction. And I'm going to tell you how to identify that later on, because it's a really fun thing to do. And once you learn to read people, you learn to communicate a lot better yourself. Yes, okay, we're back in the room, So my name's Angie McGuire. That was an incredible introduction. It was quite overwhelming because I do a bunch of stuff, but I just facilitate a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of awesome people who actually make my life really easy and straightforward and really happy too, so that's okay. Oh, sorry. Thanks. You can tell this is a non-technical talk, right? Okay, so these are some of the things I do. Ladies Who Code is a network for women developers. We have meetups all across the world. and I founded it in 2011. And it's amazing. In terms of communications, given me lots of confidence to communicate. I would not have been able to do this if I hadn't been able to practice at Ladies Who Code. And yeah, it's been awesome. Soledad, who was on earlier, she's in Ladies Who Code as well, so it was cool to see her here. Bacon is an insane conference that I run on things developers love. Music Tech Meetup, exactly what it says in the tin. We get the music industry and the tech industry in a room, and everyone fights and goes, no, you're wrong, and then beautiful things happen. And Apps for Good is a charity that works with school children to teach them how to design web apps. If any of you have free time, look them up. They're always looking for experts and volunteers, and it's really rewarding because kids, unlike adults, are really honest. Kids are great communicators because they will tell you how it is. They will be like, yeah, you're an expert, but you're wrong. I mean, no, that's ridiculous. And you're like, all right, fine. But you learn a lot from kids because they are fabulous communicators. It's when we become adults and we suddenly have politics and conflict in our lives that actually we start becoming bad communicators because we shut off. Okay, so what kind of communicator am I? Well, I'm a self-deprecating communicator, which sounds weird, but my way of connecting to people is by putting myself down or doing something silly. This is an example of this. This year for Bacon Conference, I said if we sold out, I would wear that beautiful bacon suit for the duration of the weekend. We didn't quite sell out, but we almost did, so I decided to do it anyway. It was awesome. It started conversations between other people who were like, who is that crazy woman walking about in a bacon costume? And between me and other people, they'd be like, that's awesome. Like, why are you doing that? So yeah, find your style of communication. It's really important because once you identify how you communicate, it makes a huge impact on how you connect. If you can say, okay, I'm a really confident communicator, then, if you meet someone who isn't confident, it's important to kind of read that and step back a little bit and be like, okay, well, how do we meet on a level? Because people mirror each other. And if you're like overbearing, which I am sometimes, unfortunately, then people are going to shy away from that. Okay. So why do I give a shit about communicating and connecting? Like, we could all go, yeah, I've got lots of friends already, I don't want any more. Like, why is this important? Well, scientific studies show that actually it makes you happier and you live longer. We're told all the time that we should eat 5 a day, we should go running. You know what? I'm going to tell you that it is just as important to make deep social connections because, if you not having those is as bad as having high blood pressure, it's as bad as smoking. Like, it really does matter. It has psychological effects, physical effects, and emotional effects that are not charted as well as they should be. So you're getting like a sneaky preview of it'll be the next big thing. Forget drinking kale juice and stuff. It's going to be like, be happier, make more friends, make deeper connections. So, we're ahead of the curve here today. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we become better communicators? Well, a big part of that is practice. I've been practicing for years, so I was head of communications at Mint until yesterday. It's fine, I wasn't fired. I'll tell you about it in a minute. But one of the things I was brought in to do was, my job title was the ambassador on my contract. And they wanted me to connect to different digital agencies, different companies. And how did I do that? I totally messed it up at the start. I didn't know a lot about tech, so I'd go in and I'd be like, hi guys! And everyone would be like, well, what, she doesn't have a clue. So it took practice, and it took understanding the kind of dialogue that we use in the tech industry, and it took understanding how people worked. And yeah, it's been great, and it's been an adventure. So effective communication. I'm going to give you a really short guide, and then I'm going to give you some tips on how to become much better at communicating. And then we're going to do some really fun stuff with FBI-style reading. I might get some volunteers up, and no, I won't do that. It's terrible. Okay, so one thing that isn't really commonly known is that only 45% of communication is verbal. A lot of you today will be listening to the fact that maybe at the start my voice tremored. The fact that I'm Scottish is always something. They always say Scottish people are more trustworthy. That's why they use insurance adverts. But vocal tone is incredibly important. How your volume, your speed, I speak too fast, that's my big problem. But your volume and your speed, or not your volume, your speed, sorry. Your volume and your tone is really important. 55% non-verbal. Nobody in school goes, yeah, so I really liked your talk, but your non-verbal signals, not so great. We're never taught that non-verbal communication is key to so many things, like job interviews, the first thing they're doing is looking at your nonverbal communication. Negotiations, nonverbal communication. Have we got any poker players in the room? Okay, nonverbal communication. If someone's bluffing, you have to be able to read them. Really important. For doctors, doctors are now receiving some training in nonverbal communication because patients lie. They come in and they say, oh, no, I don't smoke. And they're like, well, you do because you've just told me by your body language that you do. So, no, it's really interesting. Okay, anyone know this? Okay, the King's Speech. So this is about verbal communication. Verbal communication can be mastered through training. All great orators are trained. That's it. Practice, stand in front of a mirror, easy peasy. This kind of communication is difficult to master for two reasons. One, most of it's instinctive. And the second part is learned behaviors are difficult to reverse. So we all know who this is. I don't know if it was the best slide to put up today, but this particular gesture is really, really important in nonverbal communication, and it's called the pride gesture. And there's been an amazing study done on pride and shame gestures. And pride gestures are just what we did at the beginning there. You stick your hands up, you stick your chin up. Now, there was a study conducted by a couple of folks from Stanford, and they looked at athletes from the 2008 Olympics. And they looked at sighted athletes, or blind athletes, and congenitally blind athletes. And they looked at what happened when they won or they lost. So when people won, right across the board, right across, it didn't matter gender, what culture you were from, everybody did something similar. They all stuck their hands up in the air. Even if you'd never seen anyone do that your whole life, you were born blind, you still stuck your hands up in the air and you raised your chin. The same is true for the opposite. If you lost, you curled up or you put your hands on your head. I was going to use a picture of Portugal losing. I didn't want to do that, so I took that one out. Sorry, guys. Okay, so how do you improve your communication skills in a few easy steps? Well, I use the mnemonic RAMPER. Reactions. Learn to control your reactions. Because they're instinctive, if we don't like something, we'll be really obvious about it. So learn to gauge, to audit, and then control your reactions. Audit yourself. If you're in a room and maybe you've got an important meeting, or even in personal situations, say you're on a date, if you're slumped there, and you're like, yeah, your life's so interesting. Yeah, it's great. There's ways of changing that. And actually, the more you do it, it becomes natural. You relearn that type of behavior. Your messages should be positive. You need to reconstruct your messages sometimes. It's really easy to get, angry, especially in the industry that we work in. Twitter is my favorite example of this. Like, if someone gives you shit on Twitter, you're right back on there being like, oh, no, you didn't. No. And it's important to stop for a second and say, wait, what is my message? Because once you put it out there, you can't take it back. Positivity, obviously. Empathy. Empathy is something that if everybody in the world could just have a little bit more of it, it would be a much better place. And it's going to be important. I'll talk about that in a second. And reading others. Okay, the fun bit. Reading tells an FBI-inspired guide. So there's a great guy called Frank Pizarro, and he's a former FBI agent. And he now trains professional poker players. The best use of his ninja skills, I'm not quite sure, but he has a really fantastic book if you're interested in this. And these are just a couple of things you should look for when trying to read tells. The lip purse. So if someone purses their lips, it means they're troubled. So if you find yourself in a situation, and it can also mean that they have a very negative reaction to something. So say you're going through a contract negotiation, maybe you're working with a client, and you give them something. If they purse their lips at some point, you have to find out what point they purse their lips at, because they don't like what's happening. And then you can go back and be like, oh, well, we could change this slightly. But pursing lips is a sign of being troubled. Eye blocking. I know, what a guy. Eye blocking is a really important one because it has two functions. One is that the person is trying to shut off. They don't want to see what's happening, so they're trying to disassociate. The other one, and this is horrible, and I kind of don't want to tell you this because you'll start to get paranoid, but it can tell you if someone likes you or not. So if you walk into a room and people raise their eyebrows, generally that's a very positive reaction. They're saying, what a guy, what a lady, best pals for life. If you walk in and someone, like, they do this, so they squint. Squinting is a sign that someone is displeased with you, or there's some kind of there's tension there. So if someone keeps squinting at you, then yeah, that might be a sign that you need to do a bit more work on them. Okay, facial touching. This picture was absolutely all over the press because behavioralists and body language experts were like, we cannot believe she gave that away. That is such a tell. And what they were watching was the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound. And it was kind of supposed to be like a behind the scenes, and it was supposed to humanize the US government and say, this is what's happening and everything. And Hillary Clinton did something really interesting. She touched her face, which is a way of kind of trying to relieve stress. So human beings do this when there's a deep surge of emotion. So it can be real upset, or you're really shocked by something. You will generally touch your face because it's like a comfort thing. It's like a kind of instinctive way of getting rid of all of that. So everyone was like, oh, okay, something really, really bad went. They were watching something really, really bad because obviously no one could see what they were observing. So that was really interesting. This is my favorite one. How to tell when people are lying. Okay, first of all, do not take this as verbatim because lying is often about context. So you can't run away with this and be like, Angie told me that means that you're lying, because I don't want to destroy relationships or friendships or anything. But there are certain things that you can do to tell if people are maybe being a bit dishonest or they're bending the truth. Okay, so the first of these is, well, does anyone have any idea what someone would do if they're lying? Shout out. Look up. Okay, so that's interesting because it's not true. And everybody thinks it's true. Everyone's like, oh, they look away or they look down or they look up. They don't. When people lie, they gaze at you because they think if they look away, it makes them look dishonest. It's great. It's crazy psychology, but actually there's 40 years worth of studies saying that people will gaze at you or try and hold your gaze if they're lying. Then, if you couple that with a higher voice, people tend to talk higher when they're lying. So I definitely came to the leaving drinks for the entire night last night. You will raise your voice and you will speed up. So yeah, that's another tell. Yeah, what's the other? Sorry, completely forgotten what the first one is. Yeah, there's quite a few, but context is really important in that. So yeah, gaze. 5 minutes. Okay, the gaze is important, but my favorite one is the non-verbal verbal clash. So if someone says something to you and you think they might be lying, look at their body language because we are the worst people at giving ourselves away. So this guy, Pizarro, said that he was often called in when there was big investigations with the FBI, and they couldn't crack the guy, and they had a suspicion, but alibis matched up and stuff. And he said 9 out of 10 times it was their verbal, non-verbal that clashed, and he knew that was their guy, and they just kind of pushed on them. And there was one incident they talked about where there had been a murder, and the guy had said, okay, everything checked out for him. He seemed legitimate. He was a fabulous verbal liar. But he said, okay, so yeah, that was fine. So I walked left up the road to go home. And he was like, wait a minute. That's right. And that's where their murder scene was. This is our guy. And yeah, they eventually cracked him. So it's crazy. We give ourselves away. If you want to not make that mistake, I don't think you should ever lie, obviously, because lying is bad and everything. But if you do want to lie, that's one thing that you should check. Check your non-verbal behavior and how you can change it. Cool. So why should we be better communicators? And in turn, then make deeper social connections? Well, unexpected outcomes. For me, it's what I was saying earlier. So I haven't been fired from my job. But today is the first day that I'm CEO of my own company. And that is off the back of the deep social connections I've made through building different communities and communicating well with people, and people communicating well with me and saying, you know what, you're not an imposter. You shouldn't be scared. You've got lots of people here to support you, so just go for it. So unexpected outcomes are awesome. Learning. You learn a lot by communicating with people. In fact, it's more important probably than sitting down and reading tons and tons of text. We learn by doing, but we also learn by communicating and connecting. Sharing. I feel really privileged to be in front of all of you today, to be given this opportunity. And that's only through meeting David Diaz on my birthday this year in Lisbon, where he apparently thought I was quite funny. So yeah, he gave me a call and said, come and chat to this awesome group of people. So yeah, getting to share is a real privilege that comes off the back of connecting. Making awesome new buddies. David Diaz is my awesome new buddy. I hope to make lots of other awesome new buddies today. Yeah, so please come and talk to me if you're interested in learning more as well. Being a Jedi, with connection, with communication, comes great responsibility. And why is that? Well, you guys are at different stages in your careers. Some of you are complete experts. Some of you maybe are studying. But in our industry, it's important to look to the next step, like the next generation, those who are coming in. And we have a real responsibility to be open, to communicate properly and effectively, and to start making connections with people. Because there's a guy called David from Thunderbolt.com, and he had this great phrase where he was like, we need to be a Jedi to our Padawans. And I was like, what the hell are they? I'm a Star Trek fan. I'm not really a Star Wars fan. But then I watched it, and I was like, yes, this guy's got it down. That's exactly what we need to do. So please keep that in mind. By improving your own communication skills, by connecting more, you're actually doing incredible things for the next group of people who come into tech. Homework. Everybody loves homework. Okay, maybe don't do it here because it'll be quite creepy if you're all doing it to each other. And you'll be like, hey, I'm softening. What's happening? But yeah, when you go home, when you go back to work, and maybe there's people you find that are a bit more difficult to connect with, use soften. It really does work. Just smile, open posture, forward lean, don't lunge. Oh, not good. Eye contact and nod. The power of a nod is crazy. People, when they feel like you're interested in what they have to say, it really opens them up. That's great. Cool. If you want to know any more about this, then please drop me a tweet or come say hi. I'm going to be around for the rest of the weekend. And I want to say a big thank you to the amazing organizers of LXJS. This has been such a pleasure and a privilege. And I hope the rest of you have a really awesome rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Last year, I had the pleasure of meeting David at NodeConf EU, and we spent some real quality time together as we both missed the bus to get back to the airport at too early in the morning to actually get anywhere. And we had a very long bus ride, a city bus ride, through Ireland to get to the airport, and then a lot of running through the airport. And I didn't even get to say goodbye to him in the airport because we both just had to go immediately in opposite directions. But meeting David there, got me the opportunity to speak here and have a lot of fun conversations with David while he's been working with the core team on some issue triaging issues. So it's fantastic to have David, and I'm excited to be able to speak here to LXJS and talk to you guys about some Node. So my talk here is about foundations of Node.js. It's easy sometimes while you're working through a piece of software to forget how you've gotten to where you are. Maybe you're working on a particular bug, you're focused on how to solve a symptom, but missing the bigger picture and therefore the right solution to your problem. For instance, the asynchronous nature of Node can sometimes make it tempting to add setImmediate or nextTick to alleviate a problem. But in reality, you're introducing new subtle bugs, perhaps not just for you, but for your consumers. By changing the seemingly innocuous line of code, you somehow change the order of events, and anyone relying on the previous implicit order is now broken. We hit these kinds of bugs in Node all of the time. So while you're working on these sorts of problems, it's important to zoom out, get the macro or holistic view to make sure you've not lost the vision and the importance of what problems you're actually trying to solve. My name is TJ Fontaine. I'm an engineer at Joyent and the project lead for Node.js. For 14 years, I was primarily a systems administrator and software developer on contract. I had to support all kinds of applications across a variety of environments, from your standard Windows and Linux installs to more esoteric environments like AIX 5.3 and HPUX 10.2. And I don't know if you've had the pleasure or the pain to actually support an application running on HPUX 10.2, but it came with some really bleeding edge software. This was early 2000s, and I had Perl version 4. And I want you to know that's an important thing, and a PA RISC chip that was blazing fast. Unbelievable speed. But my passion and my motivation was largely spent in open source projects in my spare time. So when I had the opportunity to work at Joyent, I was incredibly excited by the fact I was going to work full-time on open source and not just 20% of my time. It wasn't just any open source project, it was my new crush, Node.js. I could finally leave my Python and twisted chains behind me. Node.js is far from the first framework that hit the back end. Many have come before it, many will follow it. In the infancy of the web, you had people writing C and doing CGI and frameworks around that, like Yahoo. There were people who then and still now believe Perl is the right choice for the back end. And of course, there are people who are enslaved, enjoying their time using Java and .NET. But what we have with Node.js is perhaps the right language and the right framework at the right time for developing in our new Internet of Things world. So for those of you who are playing buzzword bingo, I just said Internet of Things. JavaScript is now not only empowering those writing rich front-end experiences, it's also powering the back ends. And it's enabling teams to not only share assets between the front and back end, but it's enabling them to share engineering resources as well. First, Node.js is built on JavaScript, a mostly standardized language whose future is guided by large companies and motivated community members who graciously participate in what must be some of the most exciting standards meetings on the planet. And I'm very thankful that it's not me going to those standards meetings. And it's not surprising for me to say this, but here at a JavaScript conference, but JavaScript is what defines Node.js, but it's also what sets us apart from all of the frameworks and other backends. Since we don't have to maintain our language, we don't have to maintain our own virtual machine and our runtime. Instead, we get to focus precisely on delivering a piece of software that succinctly solves the challenges faced by you, our engineers. Since it's clear, at least in hindsight, that JavaScript was the right language to pick for this framework, the next question is, what should this framework do? There are many examples of frameworks that one can look to for guidance, and there are certainly many models that can be picked from, but what makes Node.js attractive to many people is the fact that we have such a small core. While Node.js runs now on Windows, the influence of the POSIX and Unix operating systems on our APIs is clear. Node is really just a thin veneer over top of the common Unix operating system APIs that most people were already familiar with. It makes sense, then, that the ethos of Node follows closely to that of what most people consider the Unix model of do one thing, do it well. In fact, most of our module ecosystem has adopted that philosophy as well, especially if your name is Substack. Perhaps what is sometimes glossed over about Node is actually its ability to abstract the operating system away from you. A lot of people look at Node.js as their Java do-over, and perhaps we're about as close as you can get to write once, run everywhere. But it's not actually just about our ability to straddle multiple operating systems that needs to be highlighted. What I think is interesting has to do with the fact that each flavor of operating system recognized and attempted to solve the need for scalable non-blocking I/O. Open source or proprietary, micro or monolithic, Emacs or Vim, tabs or spaces, regardless of the religious nature of these operating systems, they each solve for non-blocking I/O, sometimes in wildly different ways, sometimes in exactly the same way, and sometimes out of sheer competition. Maybe that comes from their open source heritage. Maybe it comes from their capitalist markets. It doesn't matter, because the end state was that each involved party understood what model the consumer needed to be successful while using their software. And that's exactly the decision-making process that Node.js tries to take while designing the APIs to make you successful. It's not just about what other frameworks do, but about trying to understand the use cases and creating a solution that will work for you. So while trying to maintain an ethos of a small core, how does Node identify what should or shouldn't be included in the core APIs? The first question has to do with what Node.js is trying to enable its users to do. It's not enough for us to simply give you JavaScript bindings to libc or the kernel. We have to give you the right amount of bootstrapped environment such that we can get you developing and innovating as quickly as possible. Node's design center is around distributed network solutions, so we wanted to provide APIs that can get you to an environment as quickly as possible. But it would arguably be useless if we adopted the predominant front-end language and then didn't also provide a reasonably sane HTTP interface. So the balance of what gets included in Node has to do with what we consider to be our design goals for the end user, but also to identify what might be hard for you to get right and provide that abstraction as well. So you can use the net module and write an HTTP implementation in pure JavaScript that can be installed from the module ecosystem, and I encourage you to do that. Please do that. Node will still provide one for you, though, because it can be difficult to get the semantics of HTTP right and also provide one that's efficient for your usage. So that's part of it, but Node isn't only creating new APIs on our own. Though we have and will continue to do so, it's also about responding to the needs and patterns that we see happening in the broader ecosystem. It would be easy for those who work full-time on Node, such as myself, to only work on the parts that interested us and fix those problems that we feel directly. But focusing on that can lead to us getting out of touch of what you actually need. So occasionally, we'll adopt either a whole module or an API or influenced by a popular module in the ecosystem and include that in core. And we have some good and bad examples of that for Node, but the principle is sound. If what everyone needs to be successful when executing sandbox JavaScript is actually Contextify instead of our built-in VM module, then how do we fix our VM implementation to satisfy the needs of the ecosystem such that they don't need a binary dependency and all of the pain that comes along with that for deployment? For 0.12, the solution there was to actually re-implement VM in terms of Contextify. So if you're using JS DOM, you won't need a binary dependency to be able to satisfy that. So having this vibrant module ecosystem and a widely adopted contribution pattern of forking us on GitHub makes developing for and on Node.js exciting. These aren't new ideas to software or open source, and they're not unique to Node.js, but they're a core piece of what has made Node.js successful to date, and they'll be integral to making Node successful going forward. The pluggable nature of our APIs and the ability for people to play with new features in their own branches and of Node make it easy for the project to continue to focus on what the current users' needs are and integrate back the new and interesting changes as they are proved out in the broader ecosystem. That is the foundation of Node.js, a small core designed around the idea of solving the problems people are having while also not getting in your way. That foundation isn't changing. In fact, Node is at a fantastic inflection point We're seeing a ton of adoption from the enterprise and large corporations. And people are leaving their Java encampments to come iterate quickly and solve problems in fun ways. But with the influx of these new users and companies come new challenges. When Node started as a scrappy framework that cut its teeth with early adopters, hobbyists, and many startups, it had different requirements. Node was often iterating nearly as fast as its users were. But as we've been growing up, there are more expectations from what Node can and should deliver as a software product to its consumers. So what does change? Doing the Node.js on the road events, which I will be doing one here in Lisbon on Sunday. If you're around, you guys should definitely come and check it out. One thing has become crystal clear. Even though people always want to know what's coming in the next release of Node.js, they're often reticent to change the version that they're currently deployed against. That aversion to risk is good for their deployment strategies, but complicates the future for Node.js. Historically, we've had rocky upgrades, and as such, we haven't had the greatest reputation for convincing users to upgrade to our next minor. So since we have to have compelling reasons for users to upgrade, the Node on the road events, as well as any way we can receive feedback from our users about what is and is not working, are crucial. That feedback is needed when the project defines its roadmap. That feedback keeps us from fixing things that aren't broken or adding things that aren't needed. But we must also communicate clearly what changes are planned for releases. That way we can make plans around your deployments on Node's future, which is also shaped by what your future is with Node. But along with communicating our roadmap going forward, we also need to be clear about what our commitment to stability is. Part of that commitment is to backwards compatibility. Our ability to continue to fix bugs without breaking existing people's code is a sign of the maturity of the project. We've been doing that a lot better, but there are still places we can improve. For instance, what I mentioned at the start, sometimes for Node, what's more important is not the external API so much as the behavior of events in the system. As we make changes, it needs to be clear we're making fixes for the real problem and not the symptom. That is not to say once we have an API or a behavior that it's set in stone and that can never be changed. We can still break APIs and change behaviors. We just have to provide clear transition paths and communicate directly the timing of these changes and their impacts. For instance, if what we wanted to do was deprecate domains, which is what I want to do, we have to be able to let you know domains are being deprecated. Here's the transitional model that you're going to be able to use moving forward, and here's the version that it's actually going to be removed in. We can do that. We can break those changes. We just have to make sure that we as a project and as a community are all on the same page as to what that means. We have to understand the impact of our changes, not only within Node itself, but the impact to our consumers as well. While this probably has not been the sexiest of talks you've heard today or will hear tomorrow, I wanted to reiterate just exactly what has made Node successful and how that success will shape it going forward. Node is an amazing technology that's enabling an incredibly passionate community, and I'm excited to be a part of that. But the project isn't going to lose sight of what it needs to do to provide quality software and experiences for its stakeholders. The project won't forget how it got here. Instead, it's going to use its strong foundation to take it further. And that's what the ethos of Node is getting out there and providing a useful environment for you and a foundation for you to build your work on top of. And it's going to continue to be shaped by your input and your needs, but not moving at a pace that's faster than the changes you can actually sustain. And with that, I'm going to let you guys, I'm sure the MC will come up and tell you, but I'm going to give you a little bit of time for your lunch. Thank you.